Which NBA team has the most pressure to win it all? Every NBA team wants to be the champion of the 2025 season, even the rebuilding ones, but realistically, only a few teams have a legitimate shot and a limited window closing in on them to win it all specifically for 2025. In this video, we will discuss who that team is, and the best way to find out who it is to remove all the teams in which who it is not. Let's start by doing that. The teams with zero pressure to win it all are the Pistons, Wizards, Trailblazers, Spurs, Hornets, and maybe the Bulls and Nets. These teams have absolutely zero pressure to win the NBA Finals for the 2025 season, mainly because they are clearly trying to rebuild and build their young cores for the future. Now, of course, there is pressure for these teams to say at least try to make the playoffs, specifically the Spurs and Hornets, but no one has a 2025 Pistons Finals on their bingo card, right? The Bulls and Nets are a bit of a wild card here. I think they have no pressure because they first need to figure out how bad or how surprisingly good they are going to be, and maybe we can adjust their pressure meter by mid-season. But either way, if they are surprisingly good or if they are really bad, the pressure is essentially going to be really low regardless. Take for example the Orlando Magic of last season. They were surprisingly really good, but they had no pressure to perform because they outdid their current pressure's worth. And if the Bulls and Nets are bad, well, they can join the Pistons. No pressure but paper bag heads. Next up are teams with just a tad of pressure to win it all. These teams are the Rockets, Raptors, Hawks, and Jazz. These teams don't have realistic title odds per se, but they are certainly in a competing spot for the playoffs, and with how the play-in tournament is set up, never say never for postseason outcomes, especially for final seed selections. The Rockets have the most potential to surprise the league this season, but again, just a tad of pressure is not much in the grand scheme of how much pressure it is for these franchises to be 2025 champs, but they certainly have a lot of pressure to be 2025 playoff powerhouses, or at least playoff performers, and with that indirectly comes this tad of pressure to win it all. And if you're wondering why I included the Raptors in the Jazz, well, the Jazz actually did end up locking down Lauri Markkanen, and he is an all-star caliber player, and Scottie Barnes has an opportunity to be the next franchise player for the Raptors. Moving on, we have the rebound pressure teams. These are teams who had a disappointing season in the last season or so, despite having a lot of hype or talent on paper, and they still have said talent on paper. These teams include the Grizzlies, Clippers, Lakers, and Warriors. The Clippers keep having injury issues, especially in the postseason, and after losing Paul George, makes it even harder for managing Kawhi Leonard's load management. Speaking of which, the Clippers will play 19 back-to-back games this season, and thus 39% of their games in the regular season will be played either back-to-back or only have a 24-hour rest period in between. Leonard and his load management team might still be a problem with this type of schedule. How many of these back-to-back games will he even play? So logistically it's a mess, but on paper you still got Kawhi on your roster, therefore there's still pressure to win it all. The Grizzlies really had a lopsided past 2 or so seasons. Everything kinda hit the wall after Ja Morant had a pew-pew incident and Shannon Sharp wanting to pour honey on LeBron's body after all the Dillon Brooks shenanigans. Remember, the Grizzlies were once a top 2 team in the West. They certainly have a ton of pressure to start acting like that again at the very least, and of course to rebound and win it all. As for the Lakers and Warriors, I don't care how old or how successful they are or how great they were in the past, any team with LeBron James or Steph Curry on the roster will always have pressure to win it all, regardless of the context. And this is a compliment to their greatness, not a consequence of it. Now we have the teams with a great shot to win it all, but the window is also so wide, 2025 specifically is not do or die. These teams are the Pacers, Pelicans, Nuggets, Timberwolves, Thunder, Knicks, Celtics, and Magic. These teams are good. 2 of these teams are recent champs, such as the Celtics and Nuggets, and these teams have wide windows. We're talking at the very least 3 seasons to maybe even up to 7 seasons at the most of being really strong NBA teams. Of course, with so much talent and so much opportunity to win it all, in 2025 naturally will grant pressure to win it this season. That doesn't necessarily mean the world stops spinning if one of these teams are NBA champions by next summer. And don't get me wrong, these teams should still put in 110% effort to win it all, but none of these teams need to drag all their poker chips into one spot and make do or die risky moves because their rosters are built to grow and expand for the future at this current state. Next up, we have good teams with a good shot to win it all, but their windows are much more limited or much more strained, with such high profile names specifically for the short term rather than the long term. These teams are the Kings, Suns, Mavericks, Heat, and Cavaliers. Starting with the Kings, the addition of DeMar DeRozan truly shows that the Kings want to be more than just the Kings in 2025. They are also going for the Queen's Gambit as well. I was considering putting them in the previous tier, but it's clear that they're done seeing how the duo of Fox and Sabonis grows naturally and instantly want to make that duo a trio with the addition of DeRozan. Prior to that move, maybe Keegan Murray was going to naturally be that number 3 guy, but now it looks like they have a quasi-super team, if not a full-on powerhouse worth of a team. They really want to win it all sooner rather than later. The Suns and Heat have the most pressure in a physical sense, considering Kevin Durant and Jimmy Butler are not getting any younger. Each season passes, they will be one season further from their peak prime. While you can still argue they are both really good and maybe still in the back end of their primes, the absolute snowy top of that mountain of their prime is a thing of the past, unfortunately, and thus the pressure to win it all is there. Jimmy Butler hasn't even won the finals before despite being there so many times, and yes, KD is a champion per se, but no one respects his Warriors rings. We're still waiting for him to win a ring on another franchise. As for the Mavericks and Cavaliers, they have a really unique sense of pressure to make the best player on their roster happy to stay in the city he's in. Yes, Donovan Mitchell signed a 3-year extension, but 3 years is not a 5-year deal, so he certainly gave himself room to tell Cleveland, hey, they need to put in some work if they want to keep him for the really long term instead of just being a middling playoff team. As for Luka and the Mavs, just coming off of a finals loss will instantly come with a ton of pressure to actually win it. Add in the fact that Luka has a player option in 2026-27, which may seem far out, but time moves faster than you realize, which if he doesn't want to go for it, he can tell Dallas that he's on his way out. Never say never in this player-first era of the NBA. The Mavs really need to get the most out of these next 3 years. Add in the fact that Kyrie Irving is only getting older. Much like KD and Jimmy Butler, Kyrie's peak prime is most likely a thing of the past, which means the Mavericks also have a ton of pressure to find a new sidekick if they don't win it all this year. And last, but certainly not least, the two teams with the most pressure to become 2025 NBA champions. The Bucks in second place and the 76ers in first place. I put the Bucks in second place only because Giannis is a 2021 champ, but the addition of Damian Lillard in a narrative perspective sorta counteracts that storyline, since there is certainly a lot of pressure for him to be a champion in his prime and contribute to a ring before he becomes a bench-riding ring chaser or a player that never wins one at all. This man is an NBA all-time 75 player. We can't just see him patting himself on the back. He needs to be patting himself with a ring on his finger too. Plus, the Bucks outside of injury have no excuse not to be in the finals this season. Obviously last year their best players got hurt, but if they're healthy this year, they have no excuse. Now the same can be said for the 76ers, but on a much more strict level, considering that neither Paul George or their best player, former MVP Joel Embiid, are NBA champs. At least Giannis has a ring. These two guys don't even have one. Joel just got himself yet another big name on his roster with Paul George, and while PG is 34 years old, and in a way you can argue probably out of his prime, but I still say he's got 1 or 2 more years of being really good before you truly see a considerable decline, and this is because Paul George actually kind of transformed how he plays. It was super incredible to see him rebound from his crazy injury many years ago, but that doesn't mean the pressure is gone. In fact, I would say the pressure is even higher now that he's playing alongside an MVP in his prime, being Joel Embiid. At the start of every Philly season, we hear the phrase, trust the process. And by the end of each season, we hear the phrase, bust the process. This time, the Philly fans need to hear the phrase, thank the process, and crown the town a banner. But if that doesn't happen this season, the city of brotherly love might be a city of brotherly hate. Heck, Embiid has never made it past the second round. He's the only MVP in NBA history to not do that. He absolutely, at the very least, needs to get out of that insane category. So here were the NBA teams with the least amount of pressure and the most pressure to be 2025 NBA champs. Who do you think has the most pressure to win it all, and who do you think actually is going to win it all this season? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to dunk on that like button and subscribe with notifications turned on. I'm Rebound Rewind, and I'll fast forward to you later.